everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Reimagining Payment Integrity for Payers, the Data-Driven Power of AI. Before we begin, I'll walk us through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. If at any time you have issues with audio or visual, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box, and we are here to help. With that, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers, Arun Rangamani, General Manager and Senior Vice President of Payment Services at EXL, and Will O'Neill, Vice President of Healthcare Solutions at EXL. Thank you, Arun and Will, for being here today. I will now turn the floor over to you to get us started.
Thank you so much. Today in this session, we're talking about reimagining payment integrity for payers. And how do you leverage the data-driven power of AI? And EXL is at the forefront of deploying data and AI. So we really want to make sure that the payer business also gets the benefit. Artificial intelligence is no longer a future promise. We are actually utilizing it. It's reshaping how the payers or clients are thinking about it. And we really think that the industry is moving towards a very automated way of deploying AI to identify complex patterns in fraud, waste, and abuse. Not only that, AI is also helping us redefine those PI workflows for greater accuracy, speed, and scale. The need for health plans to deploy AI has never been greater, not only for accuracy, but for speed and efficiency, and also for tackling the providers. So it's very important that the latest technology innovation is not just to automate workflows, but it's also the power to harness the data that is available. And AI is basically helping them unlock the future value of structured and unstructured data. What would have been unfathomable a few years back is right now pretty much available for both the health plans and also the vendor partner ecosystem. So in this session, we'd really like to look at how forward-thinking payers in the industry are thinking about AI, how they're deploying the safe AI in their workflows, how can organizations help with that. And most importantly, it is not just AI as a post-payment, prepayment, but also in the prior auth and prepay, other aspects of the entire claim flow process. We'll also talk about the modern AI, genAI technologies that are turning out static engines into dynamic engines now, which learn and adapt as the reimbursement methods change. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce our PI scale of operations, the payment integrity scale of operations a little bit. I'll spend a few minutes on this. We have close to 45 clients. The last 2024, we ended at $2.2 billion of savings. This year, because we are still not completed the year, we will be closing the year at about $3.1 billion of client savings. The work streams are about 256 work streams. The work streams specifically indicate for every payer, we have multiple work streams, and a DRG workflow would be part of that, or a data mining. So 256 indicate the complex and the nuanced way we deal with payment integrity programs. Of course, we have 7 of the top 10 US payers, 2,000 plus workforce. Out of the 45 clients, about 6 of them allow us to do global model. The rest of that is stateside. And we have 25 distinct programs, which kind of reflect on the right side. Different lines of business are being tackled there, inpatient, outpatient. Mainly, we're seeing a big growth in the behavioral health. We're also focusing on fraud SIU now, along with pharmacy and data mining in all modalities, both prepay and postpay. In terms of volumes of data, we handle about $1 trillion+ of claims, probably about 5 billion now with additional clients we have got this year in terms of number of claims. We do get about 2 million medical records we receive. We send out requests about 2.5, significant medical record numbers, and we're handling it all using AI. And then finally, client savings, even though it's 2.2 billion last year, the forecast is about 3 billion plus this year and about $3,000 per finding. A team of data scientists, technology experts, subject matter expertise, US registered nurses. In fact, we have about 100 doctors, both in India and US MDs, who actually help us review the complex clinical audits. That's the scale of operations in a nutshell. Next slide, please. The key industry challenges, and this is our point of view, and it's got data from the CMS projections, but this pretty much reflect. Everybody knows that the US national health expenditure keeps growing, right? And we are probably around $5+ trillion this year. Significant growth is probably the biggest topic across the nation today, and how much the cost trends are going up, the drugs costs are going up. And it's a complex ecosystem. And of course, we believe that the key drivers based on this chart, and plus what we're seeing in our data, is an aging population. Then the complexity of chronic diseases, right? It's not one chronic disease for an aging population, multiple chronic diseases they handle. And there is significant Medicare Advantage enrollment growth, causing a big demographic shift, the risk to the payers. Second is access and utilization. There's a surge in not just behavioral health. In fact, behavioral health, the drugs consumption has risen by 80% in inpatient admission drugs, for example, in behavioral health, according to the latest study by Kaiser Family Foundation. But other than that, there is a shift also to outpatient. We are seeing a huge splurge of dollars where the Medicare and aging population are using outpatient centers to get treatments done. There is also this whole post-pandemic eligibility, which is kind of coming down. The access is going to be there, but the grants given by the government are going to go away. So the whole utilization around cost is going to go up. Finally, there is hospital labor inflation. The high-cost drugs are going to be more expensive. So all these are big trends that we're observing in the market. So based on that, we are seeing payers actually dictated by the CMS mandates and guidelines. There is a lot of focus on margin restoration and operational efficiency. In fact, one of the big payers has dropped their operating margin from 4% to 1%, one of the largest payers we have. So it is significantly impacting them from a margin perspective. And there is also member coverage and how they deliver the quality of care. Finally, we all know, though the medical costs are rising, the administrative burden to manage such large volumes and deal with the entire workflow is increasing. So obviously, those are the challenges. So how do you solve for it? I think the payers are making a sincere attempt, but they're focusing on high impact specialized programs, trying to get to the 20% costing 80%, the Pareto solving method. Second is the AI claim intensity. We are noticing it, we're observing it. Mainly, the AI claim intensity currently makes a claim get better, which means that the payout from the payer would be higher. But we'll slowly start AI claim intensity to be used for fraud-based abuse too. But right now, the ability for a provider, AI has democratized how AI is used by everybody. So providers are leveraging it. So they're actually creating a better claim, probably, overall dynamic. That's what we're observing right now, which means that payment integrity as a structure gets more efficient, but then the whole claims loss and everything becomes a little tricky after that. So we're keeping a close watch on that. There is also a fragmented post-pay, prepay process and data silos. We're trying to see how we can leverage that. I think there is a lot of investment made by the payers in this space. There are multiple vendors who are helping them with that, including the system integrators and the cloud hyperscalers. But it is not an easy business, but there is a challenge that they want to conquer so that data can actually provide them the intelligence they have to have. Finally, how do you predict a denial avoidance? Because the providers, are always going to fight the battle on how to get the claims processed through properly. We also feel that there's going to be some root cause fixes around policies and benefits design, given the changing dynamics of reimbursement policies. So those are some of the key industry challenges where the payer trends are, and because of that, how the PA world is reacting or proactively approaching it. Next slide, please. Yeah, finally, this is a very good slide. So what we are finding out is everybody, every payer we observed have always had an element of how to apply technology, data, automation to the process. Prior to 2020, even before COVID, the focus had been mostly get found on automation. How do you automate a workflow? How do you introduce, data-driven decisions? But they never really had the hardware or the software muscle before. After 2020, we have seen an explosion in how artificial intelligence, machine learning models have come about. We have found that back in the day, at least 5 years back, there's a big trend towards natural language process, document extraction, AI models coming into the place. Of course, the robotic process automation is older than just 5 years, but we noticed that at the point of time, more vendors were coming in and automating things. And the key thing was there was definitely from a PI perspective, there is always this journey of how do you improve your selections, right? And how do you make it more targeted? How do you make sure you're trying to go to the right provider for reducing the abrasion? And we did notice some numbers come up. These are based on some numbers from EXL side, but in general, this is what we observed at the payer sites, PI programs too. The limitation was scalability was still not there. It still had too many human touch points. And the use cases given were very, very siloed and small point solutions. Then the journey started after ChatGPT and the explosion of GenAI. We found out from last 12 to 18 months, we are noticing that, and we are really doubling down on our investments. We're spending the effort. We're also seeing the payers spend that much effort. The other PI vendors also spending a lot of energy and money in this landscape, where they're looking at, how do you create concepts from data, automatically identify from the data what could be the outlier concepts that they need for doing data mining. Initially or earlier, it used to be subject matter experts poring over documents, taking months together to create a concept. But now we feel the data crunching is happening faster. The outlier patterns are detected. Even now, noise is there, but the signals are evident, and the SMEs are latching onto it. A co-pilot to a SME is what we're noticing using GenAI. We're also noticing medical records, particularly on contracts, are getting extracted to actually intelligent information now. So much so that a 600-page medical record can be processed in 5 minutes. It used to take 3 days before. So we're able to extract it, and you kind of give the toolkit to a clinical auditor. They're able to actually work human in the loop with the document, extracted from using a medical record extraction tool using AI. The whole process gets very efficient. Provider support, that is customer service, using GenAI toolkits for essentially ensuring the provider call centers have the right script and also the intelligence. Live when they're on a call with the provider, so abrasion is reduced significantly. Finally, on the workflow, we feel that there is a lot of application for GenAI, particularly on process operations which are mature and they're using it. So we did see a significant improvement in how much of abrasion is reduced or how many new concepts are created or productivity of an audit goes through. But it still doesn't do it autonomously. The computational cost has gone sky high right now compared to a data center before on site. On the cloud, we're still figuring that out. And hallucination is a problem in GenAI. So we're getting better at that, but it's still, we have to start looking at noise as a signal. So significant investments are made in GenAI. Finally, where we think this is all going is towards an agentic AI. And this is where we feel very confident that both the payer ecosystem and the vendor partner ecosystem will develop and evolve AI agents, which can orchestrate end-to-end processes, right? Of course, we still want to have some control on decision-making and discretionary actions that an auditor has to do or a leader has to do, but much of the work, the grunt work, as they call it, in preparing a claim, in putting it in a workflow, in collecting for the dollar or reaching out to the provider can be certainly done by an agentic AI. Of course, you need tight control and monitoring on how it's done. It requires a lot of testing, but essentially we're thinking about how AI can help in assisting an audit. And we feel data mining could be the first one to go in because medical records and clinical audits are a little bit more complex. And we also feel, that will actually result in 3 times productivity output. For example, a DRG number of audits, a DRG auditor can do is about 15 to 20 audits. We think we can go up to 40 to 50 DRG audits on complex clinical programs when agentic AI is involved. It takes away most of the manual process that cannot be, and there's a learning involved there. It's going to take some time, but we're looking at an autonomous project. Again, the final decision on an audit or a claim, humans still will be involved, but the time reduction will be significant. And of course, we're also looking at, as the system and hyperscalers are developing these newer chips and stuff, we feel that there'll be a cost reduction for payers and the vendor partner ecosystem around technology. So that's the nutshell of what we think is AI and PI from an automated to an autonomous journey. With that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Will O'Neill, our product leader. Thank you. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Arun, and all well said. So I'm going to begin just by addressing challenges across the value chain and where the AI opportunities are embedded for us in the market. So starting in the prepay modality, what we observe is challenges around static edits that lead to provider abrasion, high false positive rates, again, eating up capacity within the auditing team, and lack of identification rules in and of itself in this position. And how do we migrate the activity that's going on in the post-pay modality into the prepay modality? So here, what we believe relative to AI is that we can introduce systems and tools to help better identify risks relative to claim reimbursement by having better alignment with the guiding documents in and of itself. So when you think about a reimbursement policy and aligning the rules more tightly to the reimbursement policy, AI, generative AI, as well as leveraging in the future agentic AI, can be a source of benefit for the healthcare ecosystem. Now, moving from prepay into the post-pay modality, you see strategically placed data management, right? So data management plays a significant role, both prepayment and post-payment. We're all very well aware that there's a challenge in the industry around the management of this data. As the industry continues to consolidate, that data is fragmented between various platforms and various sources. There's no real-time ingestion of that data outside of the ANSI transactions today and a few of the workflows like pharmacy and or prior authorization. And we lack some of the scalability when it comes to organizing unstructured data. And so when we look to AI specifically, AI can help assist in taking legacy data management systems and being able to specifically observe and then curate the appropriate data out of those systems and bring them to bear, regardless of the modality. So for prepay and post-pay, and combined the intelligence from unstructured data to structured data. So when you think about a healthcare claim, it's absent of some of the context that would come in on a medical record. It's absent some of the context that would be buried within the reimbursement and the medical policies. But through the emerging AI technology, specifically what I'm observing in the agentic space, we have more and more opportunity to leverage both unstructured and structured data at a decision point to help drive better outcomes relative to claim payments. When we talk about selections, this has always been a challenge for the industry. If we looked 10 years back at the payment integrity vendor space, it would have looked like armies of claim selectors on the manufacturing floor. So doing manual digging, trying to find trends in the data to extract out where might be the payment risks. We have, again, deep dependency on technical expertise. So how are we going to query the data? And then what subject matter expertise do those individuals have to properly bring context to the data? And then that cross-domain visibility. So what's happening upstream and downstream from the claim payment lifecycle? So considering things like prior authorization, considering things like, is it appropriate according to my medical policies versus what's being dictated in my provider contracts or my reimbursement policies? Those are all complexities, right, that we have to take into account for when we're making a selection. Now, with AI, we believe that, one, we've got the ability to generate predictive analytics, right, through feedback loops that can provide a high impact to where we select those claims. AI-driven prioritization, right? Instead of somebody like Will O'Neill coming in and going through the queue manually and saying to his audit staff, here's what I'd like you to work on today. Rather, we can train agents to say, here are the parameters that you should incorporate into your prioritization mechanisms and present those opportunities to the auditors to work the right inventory at the right time. And then introducing tool sets to the selection analysts to help better organize their querying of the data and be able to create rules or repeatable processes to extract out those high risk claims and put them into the audit workflow. Next in the process, it's really the majority of the manufacturing floor of payment integrity. So the time that's consumed in having to manage a claim from it being selected to producing a recovery, there are so many different steps in that process. And as Arun elaborated on, for our business alone, we have well over 250 workflows that we have to manage. And as you can imagine, that's pretty complex and tedious work. There's consistency issues that arise from having that complex of an environment to work within. And when you have lack of workflow automation, it's really difficult for leadership to get their arms around how are we doing today compared to yesterday. And so we think it's very important for the industry to implement tools that allows us to better track and manage that manufacturing floor. So inventory management workflow platforms that give you the insight to say, what's happening per manufacturing line? So what's going on in my DRG audits? What's going on in my specialty pharma audits? And how can we use things like machine learning and medical record summarization to accelerate the manufacturing of those savings? And then post-audit, observing what are the provider abrasion points? What is preventing us from getting to those recoveries faster, better, cheaper for our customers in the industry? And here we find that it's fairly obvious, right, through the feedback loops that can be curated, whether that's via machine learning, which I would consider an intelligent automation or a level 2 automation, to what would be a level 3 or agentic automation, putting in those feedback loops to better inform further upstream as we curate our data, as we select claims, and as we work those claims to recovery. How do we organize that inventory to help lessen the burden on the providers while deliver the value to the health plan and its members? So I'm going to move forward now and take us a little bit further away from some of the industry view, and let's talk about what is EXL doing today. All right, so EXL, and relative to the AI value that we deliver, we break down into 4 components. First, I'm going to touch on commercialization. So we like to express to the industry we're modular in nature. And what does that mean to you? Unlike many others in the industry who service from a fully delegated position, we look at aspects of delivery as such. Do you need us to be a delegated delivery partner? Do you need analytics? Do you need software to enable you? Do you need AI to better enable you? And we can piece and part those components together to drive the outcomes that you're specifically looking for. Everything we do from a payment integrity perspective is typically value driven, right? So if we're not producing ROI, it's not necessarily a great place for us to play and for our customers. And then flexibility in how we integrate with our customer platforms. Our preference is around API-driven products. And we find that that flexibility has allowed us to not have to go in and modify the core systems of the healthcare payers, but rather layer on top and provide better outcomes and deeper insights to the workflows that they've already curated. Now, taking it a layer deeper, where do we participate? As Arun mentioned earlier, we go everywhere from prepayment to post-payment. We operate in prepayment audits. We can do selections as a service. We do selections for ourselves. There are pre-audit components like the procurement of medical records that we've automated well around, as well as curating the medical records to be better used during the audit process. You'll see some of those components talked about a little bit later in the presentation. Relative to the audit, we've automated those workflows, right? There'd be no way that we or our customers could benefit from having 250 workflows that were not well thought through and automated to drive the outcomes better, faster, cheaper. And then the post-audit considerations and collections. We participate in those in observing what are the trends going on with the providers. How are our auditors reacting to the inventory that they're receiving and how well can they work those? And then ultimately, what's the collectability on the outcomes that we do drive? Now, in order to orchestrate all of that, that takes technology and domain expertise. So I'll start with technology. 4 years ago, Arun, myself, and other leaders from EXL placed a bet. We made an investment in ourselves to curate the smart platform. And that's where we spend a lot of time thinking about how are we going to standardize our data, transform that data to drive the biggest impacts, and also enrich the data to deliver deeper insights for our customers. So data sources that we play with today can be claims, those can be reimbursement policies, medical policies, provider contracts, medical records, and other metadata sources like, hey, what's the activity level of this specific auditor? Or what is the procurement rate for medical records from a particular health system? All of that metadata is also folded into this smart platform so that we can operate at a very efficient level. So beyond that secret sauce, it really comes down to the people. Arun had elaborated on a variety of different functions that are managed through our people today. We have over 2,000 domain experts in payment integrity. We take that seriously. So when you think about the variety of different functions within a payment integrity operation, we want our experts to understand the entire workflow. It's not just enough for us to understand our job relative to, say, procuring a medical record or relative to performing a recovery, but we need to understand the why. And our experts really do understand the end-to-end nature of payment integrity, but also the entire claiming workflow and how a payer functions. And I do find that to be particularly unique about what EXL brings to the industry. So with that, I'm going to move on and discuss a specific use case of how we've brought forward AI and automation into our auditing process. And here, the EXL experts have done an excellent job at curating what we call smart records. So we're using NLP indexing and extraction, as well as layering on components of generative AI to find what's important, right, in the medical record so that when we perform an audit, we're zoning in or honing in on the important information that's decisionable. As you can imagine, medical records are lengthy and complex when you get into the inpatient space. We're dealing with hundreds, sometimes thousands of pages of medical information, provider notes, images. How do we sort and sift to bring forward the pertinent information to our auditors? Well, that's smart record. So we index the medical record through the NLP method, and then we add context to that to say, hey, relative to the DRG audit that we're performing, what are the important or salient points within that record that we want to leverage to justify the outcome of that audit? And what's really important here is that we find a 50 to 60% improvement in the job to be done. So we're moving faster and we're moving more accurately in the outcomes of the audit and how we can communicate that out to the provider community. And ultimately that cuts down on the disputes and appeals at the end of the day, because we know that we've observed the right information at the right time and been able to communicate that very effectively and clearly. So on our journey in the product roadmap, we've adopted this technology for our internal teams. And we're enhancing that from this year going into next year by incorporating a specific payer LLM that's better tuned than the core models you would find out in the market today, available via the hyperscalers, that's really been exposed to a variety of different de-identified medical records, a variety of different coding guidelines, a variety of different reimbursement policy and medical policies, so that it's speaking the language of healthcare a little more effectively and can identify those sources of salient points to drive the outcomes of the audits. And with that implementation, we'll take a journey into client expansion, so delivering that to each one of our customer centers of excellence. So with that, I'm going to move on. So that's one particular use case, but we're not just about one particular use case here at EXL. I really do believe that EXL has done the best job, if not one of the leaders in the industry, at thinking about how do we cascade AI and automation tools across the board. So like what we talked about earlier on, payment integrity is a little bit of a value chain or a journey. It starts with how do we come up with the concepts to evaluate where are the risks relative to the payments we're making today. We've curated a set of tools, concept discovery and smart contract, that consider what is written into the reimbursement policies and the medical policies, as well as the provider contracts, to ensure that as we create selection rules, they are applicable to how the health plan specifically plans to pay that claim. So not only will we observe trends, but they're going to be fit into the mold that the payer intends to bring to bear when it comes time to adjudicate that claim finally. So we leverage generative AI as well as agentic AI in those particular tools. When we look to smart rules, smart rules is one of our core investments when we talk about the smart platform. And this is our claims selection library and rules engine. So we needed to build a tool that can scale with the industry, considering we see about 1/3 of the payments and we interact with about 2/3 of the covered lives today in the United States. We have to process a massive amount of data and find those needles in the haystack, and smart rules allows us to do that. And through genAI enablement, it allows us to better curate and deploy out these rules with less risk and better speed at the end of the day to select those claims, either by commissioning new rules, decommissioning those rules, or modifying the rules, really at a speed that hasn't been seen in the industry. No longer are you having to wait, say, weeks or months to augment what's happening to your claim selection process. Smart Rules gives us an opportunity to do that in relatively short order, days or weeks. We talked a little bit about records, but what we didn't mention was Smart Portal. So record requisition, how do we procure those 2 million records from the industry today? We've created a tool, a unique tool, where we can interact directly with the provider community to collect the medical records electronically And that requisition time has gone down from weeks to hours. We have massive adoption of this particular tool in the market. When I think of a particular payer, where we used to see maybe 25% of the medical records being submitted electronically, that experience is well over 85, getting up to 95% today. And that has a massive impact on our operation and speeds up the auditing process for us and our customers. Now, for claim review, we talked a little bit about smart records, so I won't continue to elaborate there, but the workflow system that smart record and the provider portal and smart rules and concept discovery all connect with is EXL Mine. Again, reflecting back on that 250 or so workflows, that's EXL Mine. We've curated carefully for each one of our customers and each one of the audit types that we perform a specific automated workflow so that we can track and manage inventory. We can track and manage the motion of our auditors and the associates that support our auditors. We can report on metrics back out of the system, back to our payers and to our business leaders. And finally, in recovery and appeals, we use analytics to identify where are there opportunities to speed up that process. And again, that's being curated primarily from the intelligence and the metadata that comes out of EXL Mine. So this is a well-curated platform of a variety of different capabilities that have led to EXL being a market leader. And we're proud of that today. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So lastly, we want to talk about the key value drivers that we believe are important for us and the industry. At the end of the day, our key goals are to drive increases in auditor productivity, to increase the selection volume, but also the accuracy through these tools. We want to deliver increased annual revenue through payment integrity back to the health plans, but while managing that provider abrasion, and ultimately drive FTE savings through these automated processes. And if you think about that in 4 different buckets, when we talk about a high yield focus, what that really means, when we work a piece of inventory, more often than not, we want to be confident it's going to lead to savings for our customers. That collaborative intelligence. So how do we incorporate AI to be a tool alongside of the human in the loop, right? So taking out those repetitive processes that don't add value to the jobs to be done and get down to the decision points and helping those auditors be able to quickly identify where the risks reside in the claim itself and drive the savings outcomes. Productivity optimization, I think, is fairly obvious here. By curating an automated workflow, as well as thinking through how can we better ideate about the concepts that we bring to bear. How can we better extract the information out of the medical records? How can we better shake hands with the provider community in procuring the medical records? That's been a core focus of ours relative to the productivity optimization. And then ultimately quality improvement. We want to ensure when we complete an audit, it's final, right? We do not intend to deliver audit results that are ultimately going to cause increased provider abrasion, disputes, and appeals. And so that is an aspect that we have layered into all of our workflows. When you talk about concept ideation, there's a QA check there. When you talk about deploying a new rule in Smart Rules, there is a production release cadence there to ensure we're releasing rules that are fit for production. EXL Mine, several checks and balances there to ensure that the inventory is worked in a relatively quick fashion, but with a high level of accuracy. And so for the future, we think that we've got the foundation and we've already started to incorporate some of these advanced technologies. We're really excited that because of how we go to market, we can bring these same technological capabilities to you, whether that be through service, analytics, and or technology to augment the outcomes of your payment integrity operation. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and allowing me to walk through our process. And I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Arun, to see if he's got any last comments for the group.
Thank you, Will. A great walkthrough on what we are, what we do today and where we see the market going. The only comment is the health payer ecosystem, payment integrity. There is no better time done now to implement AI, data-driven decision-making processes, and leverage all the data assets, the technology assets they have invested on. So EXL is here for you, but most importantly, this is the time to step into the new future of how PI can work. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Well, thank you, Will and Arun, for a wonderful discussion today. We'll now begin today's question and answer session. So audience, please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A box on your screen. And with that, we'll get started with the first question here, which is, how do I start my transformation journey? Am I already too late?
I think that's a great question, and I'm happy to give my opinion, and Arun, feel free to do the same. I think there's three things that you have to look at. And by the way, just to address the elephant in the room, is it too late? No, absolutely not. You can get started today. And if you noticed on some of the, or within some of the slides, our partners have done a really nice job. So when you think of the NVIDIAs, the AWSs, et cetera, we're not having to necessarily rip out the core of your technology. Rather, we're finding ways to integrate with your core to deliver the desired outcomes of AI. So considering we don't have to do a rip and replace, then it's really about how do we, first identify opportunities that are going to be high impact. Next, what we want to do is consider what will be low effort, right, for the organization. And finally, what's going to be highly feasible, right? I think of those three buckets as the mix. And when you can collapse those together, I think you'll find that you'll be ready to implement your first of many AI projects. I know that this is near and dear to Arun's heart. When I come in and I've got the next best thing since sliced bread, he's always going to ask, hey, what's the impact to the business, Will? Is this going to be low effort or is it going to be high effort? Is it going to be difficult for us to accomplish, right? And then how feasible is it? Do we have the data necessary? Do we have the expertise necessary? And so when I think about going on the adventure of implementing AI, those are the three core principles that I think are the first things you need to analyze. So I'll pause there, Arun. I don't know if you've got anything that you'd like to elaborate on.
I violently agree with what you said, Will. That's the method we are following internally. We also do what we call as to get that together, that's called an evolutionary prototype method, where we evolve, prototype, evolve. But what is key is identifying the use case, as Will was pointing out, be laser focused on that. Because solving payer operations problem or claims operations problem is like eating an elephant. Now to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, and you should choose the right bite so you can keep eating for the rest of the time. So it's important to realize what is really of value to you, high value, and also make sure your investments you have made so far, who you're partnering with or internally, is fruition, it's brought to fruition. And be bold about failing fast, because if you're not getting something done, go to the next project. Those are the additional things, but Will covered it. You covered it amply. Will, that's the method to the madness that exists in payer operations today. Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you both for your insights there. We've got another question asking, what are the best practices for integrating AI into payment integrity workflows to ensure operational efficiency, speed, and accuracy?
So again, Arun, if you don't mind, I don't mind opining on this a little bit.
You're the...
So I think the first principle that I like to think about is sometimes when we think about the advancements of AI, we're walking around with a hammer and everything looks like a nail to us, right? And there's levels of automation that need to be considered. So I'll break it down into 3 different buckets. Level 1 would be rule-based automation. That's pretty simple, and it's what's been pervasive in the industry. Level 2 would be intelligent automation. So machine learning, things like RPA, computer use, NLP, right? Those are great tools. We should not look past those. There are so many use cases today that still can leverage those very, very good technologies. And then third, right, we have agentic, an emerging technology that I know everybody is still educating themselves on. I myself am still reading the books of the industry to ensure that I've got the best of breed thinking relative to how are we going to curate our agents. So not every problem requires an agent, but in order to implement a well-curated solution relative to payment integrity, I think it's really important that you first understand the process, right? So if you have a well-documented process, and then you understand how does all of the data operate in that process, that's a great foundation to start with. And then you can start understanding, is this a level 1 rules-based solution that we need to implement at this stage? Is it level 2 or is it level 3? So intelligent automation or agentic automation. So that's kind of how I think about addressing, a payment integrity problem. When we went down the path of curating something like smart record, right? If Arun would have come to me, I probably would have said, hey, Arun, absolutely, we just got to go with agentic, right? But thoughtfully, the team has said, no, let's really understand the process. Let's understand the workflow for the auditor. What's salient to them and what may be the best tool that's going to deliver, again, the highest impact, the lowest effort, with the best feasibility. And NLP does a great job at that today. Now, can agentic AI come in and offer some additional context to that job to be done? Yes, absolutely. But I think that we've got such an excellent and thoughtful team in how they've curated some of these capabilities. Something like a smart record is a great example of where the team took the time, understood what the art of the possible was, and landed on a solution that's delivering the biggest impact, right, with the lowest effort, and with the technology that can be brought to bear with the highest level of accuracy today. So Arun, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have any other thoughts.
Tough act to follow after what you said, Phil. I think the key thing is there is 3 elements to any business, right? People, process, technology. What Will was talking about was which technology to what process, and don't overcomplicate the technology when probably a simpler process automation tool is available. That's where investments are kept. I'll talk about the people part a little bit. It also requires a lot of mind share, mind shift, cultural change, a lot of change management required, because most of my team stateside have 25 to 30 years of actual healthcare experience. And we have to provide and introduce AI into the culture so that they get augmented on the value they provide back to the system and the payers. And it should at no point of time be a threat to what they do today. It is always to increase the value. So EXL is very thoughtful and deliberate about this, because the process and technology finally lands on some person to do it. And hey, can we do autonomous DRG clinical coding audit? I don't think so that easily. We will automate a lot of process steps within it, but we still need the registered nurse or a doctor or a claims coding expert to do the job. So we have to make sure they are receptive to the AI process technologies. I'll focus on the people. Will you cover the process and technology part beautifully?
Thank you.
Wonderful. We do have time for one more question. So audience, if we do not get to your question today, we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar. But with that, we have a question asking, Can you share some real-world examples of health plans using AI to reduce payment leakage, improve accuracy, and accelerate recoveries?
Sure. Arun, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about
go ahead. Please go ahead.
A nascent use case, and then maybe we can talk about another one that's a little more mature, right?
Sure.
So nascent use case would be, hey, I'm a healthcare payer, and I want to understand, how do I benchmark my reimbursement policies against the market, right? So the thought process behind reimbursement policies, of course, that starts at the federal level with CMS and then can be augmented further with state rules. And then you have your NCQAs, your URACs, et cetera, trying to ensure quality about the outcomes of those reimbursement policies. But ultimately, when you get down to the commercial or MA plan, there's going to be some tweaking, right, to the reimbursement policies that are typically dictated upstream in those federal and state spaces. Now, if I were asked yesteryear, hey, how would I do that? I would need to hire consultants. I would need to go then scan the market to pull down whatever is publicly and readily available. I would need to personally read those documents, and then I would need to be able to comprehend and elaborate on what are the differences. Now, with the advent of agentic AI, I can automate some of those repeatable steps. So extracting the information that's publicly available from the internet, right? We know that reimbursement policy and clinical policy is commonly available and published so that providers have insight into that information. We can use tools then to read through and identify the differences between how one would curate a specific reimbursement policy to the next, and identify what may be the best in class reimbursement policy. And when you think about pulling that particular lever, yes, it's not an audit and recovery activity, but it does lead to cost of care savings at the end of the day if you're attempting to figure out what would be the most economically viable reimbursement policy for my particular health plan. There are lots of other considerations like provider abrasion, member abrasion, et cetera, to be considered in that equation. But that's a nascent use case, right? In how I have specifically observed health plans starting to leverage the emerging technologies for AI.
I can probably add to that, Will. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, please.
So for one of the large customers, and what we have seen is there's a huge incentive and impetus to shift upstream, as we call it, towards a prepay and towards things which were not feasible a few years back. Because of the advent of AI, a prepay complex clinical audit can be done in 4 hours, what used to take 3 or 4 days before, because the prepay was never a modality that can be done on a complex clinical audit, if payment integrity experts will agree with me. So we are observing that trend where AI is used for medical record extraction and intelligence around it, contract extraction, the data being available to them, the medical records, the electronic part of it. Bill was mentioning about 20% to 85% of the medical records is electronic for EXL at least, and we're seeing it in the major trend in the market. A shift to prepay is real, it's happening. It is thereby reducing the cost or the dollar outflow, cash outflow from payer outside, because it's cost avoidance, not cost recovery in prepay, which kind of hits the bottom line hard, because these payers are operating at 1%, 2% operating margins. So imagine saving $300 million of net outcome, lower outcome, where they're avoiding the cost from happening. And this is all possible because of AI. We are seeing the needle shift anywhere between 20 to 45% from postpay to prepay. Big use case, and that's getting solved right now as we speak. Every day we see more changes happening in that space. Thank you, Will. Thanks.
Super.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank you both, Will and Arun, for an excellent presentation, and thank you to EXL for sponsoring today's webinar. Audience, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.